Mr. President.
Senator from North Carolina.
Thank you, Mr. President. In a moment, I'm going to talk about the immigration debate that we're going to have here. And probably before I do that, though, I want to recognize that this is Valentine's Day. I happen to be several hundred miles away from my sweetheart, but I want to wish my wife, Mr. President, a happy Valentine's Day, and I've made her a little card. I'm sure I probably just violated a rule, but I don't think anybody can fire me, and I just want my wife to know I love her and I wished I was with her. Now I want to talk a little bit about immigration reform. We just heard a discussion. I tell you, sometimes I think I teleport from this chamber to the Kennedy Center because there's more theatrics going on here than you could find down there on any given day. Now let me give you one example of that. The whole discussion, the indignant position that the member from New Jersey just had on chain migration. Somehow that mean Republicans came up with this term because we wanted to make a point. Demographers came up with this term decades ago. People on the other side of the aisle even have reference to chain migration in bills that they proposed. In the theatrics, solve this problem. Now let's talk about the president's framework. I heard, I was presiding just before I got up here, and I heard the word hardline used, the hardline demand of President Trump. I don't agree with everything President Trump's done. In fact, I said a year and a half ago, got criticized for it, that when you sit down and you talk to Border Patrol and you talk to Homeland Security, you're going to find out you don't need a large monolithic wall from the Pacific Ocean to the Gulf of Mexico. The president, after he was elected, after he got into office, listened to Homeland Security, listened to Border Patrol, and he came up with a plan that isn't a long monolithic wall across the southern border. It's a strategic plan that actually lets us improve the security of the homeland in the northern and southern borders. It's a plan that tries to confiscate tons and tons of drugs that are poisoning Americans in the thousands of every year, tens of thousands of every year. It's a plan that makes sure that gang members are more likely to be incarcerated when they cross the border illegally and less likely to go into the very communities that many of the people who immigrate to this country go into, is to make those communities safer. It's a plan to make sure that we know the thousands of people that cross the border illegally are not carrying illicit drugs in a truck or a car or in a wheel well the way that they do it today, because it's using technology to be able to search more vehicles, to make sure our homeland is safe. It's also a plan that shows more compassion than President Obama's DACA plan. Right now, they're saying, let's just keep DACA going. Well, there's 690,000 people who are in DACA, and their future is uncertain because it's an executive order. It doesn't have the force of law. It could possibly be challenged by the court. The president decided on September 15th of last year, Congress, do your job. You've been talking about immigration reform for 2 decades. And what we have is an arguably illegal executive order by President Obama that President Trump kept in place for about a year. And then he said, I'm going to give you all 6 months to do your job. Something that has enduring value. Now, the DACA proposal only provided the illegally present persons who came to this country through the decisions of an adult with some certainty that they wouldn't be deported. But it doesn't give them any certainty in terms of a path to citizenship. So people said the president has a hardline plan. DACA allows 690,000 people who have signed up for it to be here and hopefully not have that decision thrown out by the courts or have the president rescind it. The president's hardline plan, what we just heard from 3 or 4 members on the other side of the aisle, the hardline plan is to have nearly 3 times as many people with a path to citizenship. Citizenship, not a piece of paper that hopefully will be in place for the time that you spend in the United States, but citizenship. So the president's hardline plan, which actually legalizes about 2.5 times as many people, not to just let them be here present to have a legal status, but have a path to citizenship, that's hardline. And I'm not sure that the president was there when he was running for office, but he listened. He recognizes he wants to be the president to get something done, and he's willing to accept the criticism from people on my side of the aisle who may not support a path to citizenship. I do. And the president does. I find it remarkable that somebody would say a president who has endorsed a bill to provide a path to citizenship to 1.8 million people, 2.5 times more than President Obama provided a temporary and passing status, if that's hardline, my goodness. Now, border security. Why is border security important? Is it just purely a hardline deportation forces sending people out? No, I already talked about, number one, hundreds of millions of doses of heroin, of fentanyl, and other illicit drugs come across our border every year. We simply do not have the people, technology, and infrastructure to interdict them. The $25 billion, about $18 billion of it would be spent for border security. About 10 to 15% of that on the northern border. The remainder on the southern border. Some of that will be wall structures. When it's all said and done, less than half of the 2,300 miles will have a wall structure. The rest of it will be spent on training, on additional personnel. If you've ever gone to a border crossing, you know the long lines that they have there. It's actually creating technology that's low-intensity X-rays where you could drive a vehicle through. And the Border Patrol folks can identify human smugglers, human traffickers, drug smugglers without ever having the person get out of the car. That's what the border security plan's focused on as well. It is wall structures where they make sense. They don't make sense along about half of the border. Let me tell you the humanitarian case for this, which I find remarkable that no one on the other side of the aisle will bring up. I went to Texas last year, and I went along the southern border. I was on the Rio Grande on the Border Patrol boats. I was on horseback at night. I took ATVs around. And I heard a lot of stories from a lot of people, including property owners. Over the last 20 years, 10,000 people have died trying to cross our border. That's on U.S. soil. We have no earthly idea how many thousands or tens of thousands of people died just trying to get there. So 10,000 people died over the last 20 years because we didn't know where they were. They were on American soil. We didn't know where they were. About 1,000 of them were children. If that's not a case for knowing who's crossing the border and where they are, even if they may get deported, if they don't have a legitimate claim to asylum, threat to their safety, I don't know what else is. I don't see how border security is hard line when you look at the facts. Not the theater, but the facts. So I think that second pillar of the president's proposal is balanced. It's less than what he originally wanted, but it makes sense, and it shows a lot of movement on his part. Again, 2.5 times the number of people making actually getting a path to citizenship, more than the DACA executive order proposed, and border security that makes sense. It's no longer this idea of a monolithic wall. Now we heard somebody say there's a dramatic cut to legal immigration and the promise we made to everybody who's in the line because of a family relationship that's going to be broken. Utter nonsense. There's no proposal like that on the table. The fact of the matter is there are about 3.9 million people in the backlog that if the president's proposal is accepted will get to this country in half the time it takes today. There's about 3.9 million people waiting to come to this country because of a family relationship that we've proposed, that the president has proposed, should be able to get here sooner. Now, the diversity lottery is also something that I think's been, people have either been misled or they're trying to mislead you. I don't know. I'll leave it to you to decide. But the diversity lottery is not ending it. It's actually coming up with a reasonable way to use those 50,000 green cards in a way that lets us draw down the backlog sooner instead of having somebody wait 17 years or 20 years to get in the country, maybe 8 or 9. But then it's also with a focus on the underrepresented countries, many countries in Africa, about 15,000 that we would like to make sure they have an opportunity every year to come to this country. They're from an underrepresented country. And we've already made proposals and said we're open to other proposals to make that be a part of how the diversity lottery gets settled. 50,000 will continue to come. So when we're saying ending the diversity lottery, we're not saying ending the entry of 50,000 people. We're just talking about modernizing it. My goodness, the last time we did any major immigration bill, I was 5 years old. I think it's about time to look at how the world has changed and maybe open your eyes and open your heart to a better better way to do it that benefits the person trying to come to this country, but benefits our country as a result of their entry. I think it can be a win-win. Now, the last thing again on chain migration, I'm going to go back. I'm going to find everybody who's voted for bills in the past, and they voted for a bill with legislative language in it that referred to chain migration, because I'm sick of that kind of garbage going on the Senate floor. That's just misleading. Chain migration is just a process that's been used in the past, not only by our country, but other countries, to kind of link people together. And I'm absolutely sympathetic with some of the things the gentleman from New Jersey said. But to say this is some hateful, divisive term is not paying a whole lot of attention to your job, because many of these people were here. I've only been here 3 years. Many of these people were here. They voted for language that had chain migration in it. Now they're saying it's something that the hateful folks in our marketing departments created to be divisive. Just untrue. Now, the last thing. When we're talking about legal immigration in this country, we immigrate about 1 million to 1.1 million people a year in this country. I, for one, don't have a problem with that number. I, for one, if I had members on the other side of the aisle, some of my colleagues say, Tom, we want to try and maintain that same amount of immigration over time, I'd say I'm open to it. Some of my colleagues that I've worked with on this bill may not be. But the way that we go about doing it needs to be modernized. How many times have I heard how we need, when we have a foreign national here who graduates with an engineering degree or some degree in STEM science, that we should just staple a green card to the back of their diploma? How many times have we heard that? Because we need high-end workers. We need welders. We need carpenters. We need plumbers. We need people coming to this country to fill jobs, or at some point, our economic growth is going to be limited by the number of resources we have for the job. Our unemployment's going down. The demand for workers are there. But we've got an immigration system where about 3/4 of everybody that comes to this country come purely because of a family relationship. Now, I bet if we dig into it, many of them actually could qualify on the basis of merit. But right now, it's just a random selection that doesn't really tie to our needs as a nation and for our economic growth, for our economic security. I, for one, believe if we get the immigration policy right, that over the next 10 years, we'll be building a case to have more legal immigration here, more than the 1 million or 1.1 million. But if we don't fix this, we're not going to fix the underlying problem with our immigration system. So, Mr. President, I actually didn't plan on speaking. I just grabbed a couple of these slides so that I could talk about it. But it's very important to me for us to, I don't like being a part of an organization that talks a lot and doesn't get anything done. And over the last 17 years, that's all these folks have been doing. Re-elect me. I promise you, next year I'll get immigration reform done. Next year I'll file the DREAM Act and we'll get it done. Well, guess what? It hasn't gotten done under a Republican administration. President Bush was sympathetic to this issue. He couldn't get it done. Congress couldn't get it done. President Obama comes in. I'm going to fix immigration. President Obama had the votes to pass Obamacare. That is a majority. There was a time in this chamber where not a single Republican vote was necessary to pass a bill out of here, right? So if you don't need a single vote in Congress, it's Republican, on the House or the Democrat side. Why didn't you get it done? Because I don't think you've taken the time to construct something that makes sense, is compassionate, that's responsible, that will have the enduring value of law. So now's the time to get it done. And the only way we're going to get it done is with bipartisan cooperation. If you don't like the president, some of the elements of the president's framework, instead of hammering it and folding your hands and saying, if you won't vote on mine, I won't vote on yours, look at this and tell us how we can improve it. Tell us what we need to do to get a vote. Tell us what we can do to moderate this. To call this a hardline bill is absurd. It's theatrics. It's the kind of stuff that's prevented this from getting done for the last 17 years. So, Mr. President, I hope people will have an honest discussion and debate. I hope people will come down here, offer all the amendments they want to. And I hope they'll be mature enough, if it fails, to move on to the next one, because I, for one, want to provide certainty to the DACA population. Those 900, you know better than me because you're in Marine Reserves, what, 900 people serving in the military today. That's more than a battalion, right? We've got over 900 people serving in the military who are DACA recipients. I want to file this bill. I want to get this bill to the President's desk and say, welcome to this country. Thank you for your service, and I can't wait to go to your ceremony where you swear the oath as an American citizen. That's what we can do this week. But I'll guarantee you, anybody who sits here and says that the President's proposal is unfair and insincere and hardline, they're playing politics. And it makes me wonder if some of them would just as soon have this be the "if you like me next year, I promise I'll fix this problem" campaign speech versus take this off the table, provide them certainty, do something different for a change. Now, finally, I started by wishing my wife happy Valentine's Day. When I get into these speeches, I worked in business most of my career. I've been in politics very long. I get very frustrated with a lack of production, with a lack of results. But sweetie, I'm not mad. I just get a little bit intense when I talk about an issue where the solution is within reach. I'm not mad. I'm frustrated with the members of the U.S. Senate who don't see the opportunity to seize this moment and get it done. So, Mr. President, thank you for the opportunity. I probably went long, and I apologize to anybody else who may be waiting to speak. But this is the week to get it done. This is the Congress to get it done. This is the President that's given us a historic opportunity. I hope we seize the day. Thank you, Mr. President. I note the absence of a quorum.
Clerk will call